Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Destination Linux number 210. Whether you're brand new to open source or a guru of sudo, this is the podcast for you. My name is Jill, and with me today are the leaders of the tail class on the Snowpiercer, Noah, Michael, and Ryan. They have joined me on the 10-mile train.
Yes.
We need
I
a
knew you would
host
know
that
that
can
reference.
Explain to some of us what the
Don't
intro
watch
means.
Snowpiercer.
Typically, I'm involved with it, and Noah's the only one out. I have no idea what's happening right now.
Jill,
okay.
please tell me you watched Snowpiercer.
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay,
so
good.
it was it was a movie in the mid 2000s,
Right.
about the people. They were trying to get rid of global warming, and things went awry, and we became a frozen planet.
And all
So-
civilization is on a train. And
Yes.
new episodes of the TV
It's-
series start Monday. Are they sponsoring us?
Apocalyptic.
That's interesting timing.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to talk about on this show today, Jill?
Okay, so you've heard us talk about Matrix and Mastodon, along with many other decentralized services. But what does that actually mean, and why does it matter? Well, this week we're going to deep dive into the various Fediverses to answer these questions. We're also going to cover some recent exciting news from Red Hat, which is guaranteed to make many in the community very, very happy. We will also discuss why Chromium may soon be missing from your distro repository. We also have our tips, tricks, and software picks. All this coming up right now on Destination Linux. So hop on board this train full of penguins.
Nice. All right, this week in our community feedback, it actually comes from our discourse forum. So if you're not a part of that, go check it out. But SBeeb, I think is how you pronounce it, asks, is the opportunity to fork open source code a blessing or a curse? And so he goes on to say, it seems to me that Linux desktop just can't seem to rise above a glass ceiling of about 2 to 3% of the total market. This is after decades. Why can't we rise above that glass ceiling? Now, I've redacted some of the stuff in here because it was a very long post, but ultimately some of the things he goes on to say is there's so much forking of distros that it can be bewildering. Every major distro covers most desktop environments as well. Calling these spins, remixes, for example, all of the Ubuntus, all those permutations, try to cover all the possible bases, but in his opinion, only serve to muddy the water and offering people way too many choices. Humans can famously only remember a running list of 5 to 9 things. They don't like being overwhelmed with too many things at once. So as much as we all like the ability to fork open source code as it acts as a protection of sorts against foul play, do we also overuse that freedom and thereby hold ourselves back by stunting our popularity with not a clear enough vision, not clear enough choices in a direction that everyone can unite around? So the community started responding to this in various ways. Some people disagreed, some people agreed, but I wanted to bring it back to the hosts here because this is something that I've been seeing going around multiple times from influencers within the Linux community talking about this. We need to stop creating distros, start focusing on apps and things like that. What say you all? Michael, let's start with you.
Well, I think this is an interesting, and it's a great question, and that should be discussed on a big scale, like a much bigger scale, because it's something that we as a community should be wary of. Because for me, I think the answer lies in the middle. It's both a blessing and a curse, and or another way to put it, it's a double-edged sword. So I think it's great to be able to take something that is open source and make it better. In some cases, this even provides like a bulletproof status in terms of like the code so that it can't be ruined by bad actors. For example, like take LibreOffice. When OpenOffice was the go-to open source Office suite, it was great as long as Sun Microsystems was in control of it. And then when Oracle took over, they effectively ruined the project, causing a need for a fork. And thanks to the structure of open source licensing, it was possible for it to be forked and then become LibreOffice. And I think this is a testament to the resiliency and bulletproof nature of open source that it offers through this forking system. But at the same time, the point about too many choices is a very valid one because too many desktop environments can be confusing and overwhelming to new users, and even too many distros and options and stuff like that can be overwhelming to those same people. And I think it's a fair question, and I think the topic is very important to discuss and break down. So I guess what I'm trying to say is yes, no, maybe, I don't know.
All right. Well, maybe Jill has more detailed points on this one. Jill, what are your thoughts when you hear this?
That was good, Michael. That was really good. It was kind of where I was going to go too.
Yeah.
But I do feel that now that desktop Linux is on more hardware, we are seeing change. We are seeing the desktop Linux getting more adoption from the likes of Dell and Lenovo and System 76. That is helping a lot. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you don't want to fork too much because it does confuse the community. That's a real thing. Definitely. Yeah. And I think SBeeb, you are right. I think we do need to focus more, maybe not be creating any more distros and just focus on making several quality, which we are. We've got the Debian, we've got Red Hat, we've got Fedora, and I think we just really need to focus on the main ones.
Absolutely. Noah, what are your thoughts?
I try to separate what I believe politically from what I believe technologically. So technologically, I do think that code should be open. I think it should be available for people. And I think that you don't really own a product. You're not really purchasing software. You're just kind of borrowing it if the company ultimately controls if and when you can install it. Not that this is necessarily what defines open source from proprietary software, but one of the big advantages of having access to the source code is it makes it useless to do those things, right? There's nothing stopping, let's say Blender, from implementing a thing that requires a little hardware key that you have to plug into your computer, and then you have to call them and give them a number, and then they read you a magic incantation back, and then you punch that in, then okay, now you can use the software, right? There's nothing stopping them from coding that, but there's also nothing stopping me from calling up our developer at Altispeed and saying, hey, I need you to fork this project and I need you to take that bit of code out so it doesn't require all that. And then he can do that, right? So there's no point in selling a key. You're better off just selling support on top of that or providing real value back to the person who's going to use your software. So yes, it is true that every time we start to make some progress on the Linux desktop, whatever the cool thing is just immediately gets ported to Windows and Mac. And yes, that can be very frustrating. And yes, it does kind of create this artificial glass ceiling because OBS takes off. Oh, finally, Linux is going to take off. This is fantastic. It's only available for Linux right now. This is really great. Oh, wait, no. Then they make the ports for Windows and Mac, and then it becomes all one thing. And then now it is the go-to piece of streaming software, but it really doesn't point people back to Linux. It has, however, pointed people back to open source. I go into a lot of businesses and visit with people. And even 5-7 years ago, if you walked into a business, there were a lot of people that had never heard of open source and had never thought about the software licensing that came with the software. But these days, especially in larger organizations, you get CTOs asking, oh, what's the vendor lock-in look like for that? What's the data exportability of that system, right? They're asking those questions because one, previous companies have incorporated that into their sales strategy saying, hey, you're not locked into us. We don't have a vendor lock-in thing. We do make it easy to get your data in and out. And here are some of the things that you should look at when you're evaluating and then insert, CRM, EMR, whatever it is. Do bad things happen because the code is open? Of course they do. Of course, there are people that are going to take, hey, those crazy little people over there in the 8% world, look at that. They have another winner. Great. Let's pull that over here into the environment we're already comfortable with. Great. Back to work, right? Yes, that happens all the time. Yes, it causes a lot of us to want to bang our faces into brick walls sometimes because it's frustrating. But at the same time, the conversation is being had where those people start looking, they go, man, Blender, VLC, Firefox, all FFmpeg, all of the OBS, all of these really great programs are coming out of this open source thing in this open source world. And so now you see platforms that aren't even open source. They're proprietary platforms we were working with an animation studio and they use a software called DAZ 3D. Only runs on Windows.
Yes, know that well.
But yeah, but when you go to DAZ 3D, one of the big things that their salespeople talks about is their commitment to open source. Now, they don't understand the term open source because they use it as basically like what they mean to say is open ecosystem. If you have that software and everybody else has that software, then you can exchange, art within that ecosystem. But if you go to their site and you scroll to the bottom, they list it under open source and they talk about how they can bridge and export to all of these different software things, and they consider that open source. But the philosophy though, and the mentality of, hey, you don't get to just write code and charge me an arbitrary arbitrary amount of money and then choose what to do. If you don't let me have the freedom to do what I want with that thing, then I'm not going to use your product. I'll go over use this one. And companies are getting hip to that. So that I think is a good thing.
Yeah. So while the desktop itself is 2 to 3% of the total market, and people hang on that and say, when you look at open source as a whole, its popularity, the growth of it, I think it starts to swing back around. So you can't just look at one metric and say, well, Linux desktop's been stuck at this 2 to 3% mark. When you look at open source as a whole, I agree with you. I've seen the same thing. I've worked in the telecom industry for over 20 years. Open source was never really mentioned. Stuff existed, but it was really never mentioned. Now it's a part of the planning of companies with 40, 50,000 people figuring out, do we adopt this open source thing? So when you look at it from that perspective, the hope is, of course, you want to get that desktop growth in there at some point. But at least we're starting to get people to take open source seriously, so much so that they're using it as a marketing term, even incorrectly, just to say, hey, I've got something open source out here as part of a sales pitch to people, which, hopefully we can correct that if you're in any of those meetings and be like, stop, because you're not
respectfully,
really.
I think it's probably a little bit more than a sales pitch. I do believe that the mentality and the perception is changing. People are moving that direction. They're becoming hip to it, and they're starting to ask those questions. So,
we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying companies are using it as a marketing term.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and they don't understand it.
Exactly. Some don't.
Yeah.
We love hearing from our worldwide community. What we want you to do is get your official DLN mug. We want you to fill it with some coffee, just like I have here. Sit down at your nearest stool and send an email to comments@destinationlinux.org. If you want to be part of the community discussion like this one, then join the DLN forums by going to dlnforum.com. This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean recently announced their new app platform service, which is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. No, it sounds like you're reading an ad read. Well, I kind of am. So I'll tell you what that means. What that means is you don't have to think about how many meetings you're going to have to sit through and how many whiteboards you're going to have to put up there to explain how you can take this idea that you have that you want to move forward and then hand it to your dev team. And then that goes to the DevOps team. And then eventually that goes into the staging. And then once that's done, then that goes over to deployment and production. Then those guys will handle it, and our server guys will. No, none of that. You write your code, you put it up on GitHub, you log into DigitalOcean, you create an account. We give you the free server because you listen to Destination Linux, and then they build your app. That's it. And as a listener of the Destination Linux podcast and a member of the DLN community, you're going to get started for free. Better than for free, because we're going to give you money. We're going to put money in your pocket to do this. You can do that by going to do.co/DLN. That's do.co/DLN. That tells DigitalOcean that, hey, 1, I listen to Destination Linux and I learn a lot. 2, we really, really appreciate you helping them help me get this $100 credit so I can use your really fantastic service and spin my app up in 5 minutes or less. And I want to get started with that $100 credit. So I went to do.co/DLN, and a huge thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this week of Destination Linux.
Okay, we have a really deep discussion to do now. What is the Fediverse and why does it matter? And me and Michael and Ryan and Noah are going to let you know all the details. But first, let me set the stage. So to explain the Fediverse, let's first define services that don't use the Fediverse, which is the vast majority of services that the general public uses today, such as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or services like Telegram. And the common thread between these services is they use central servers that are owned and operated by a single corporation. And that's not always good.
As we've seen from Facebook.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And their goal in general is to grow as big as possible, creating entire global communities and look in their user base to that single platform. This means they get to decide everything from privacy policy through to the content that can or cannot be posted. Not good. They have the ability to take away your entire means of communication with one ill-informed moderation decision. And so with a service that uses the Fediverse, anyone can create their own instance. So all instances are moderated and controlled by the community.
This is something that I hear commonly come up, and I did a video on this week just to kind of break this down, is people are under the impression that if you join one of these decentralized platforms, let's say that utilizes a Fediverse, that that means there's complete and utter freedom. There's no moderation. People can say whatever they want, and certain groups or other things that they may not want to be affiliated or know can overtake those. And that's actually the furthest thing from the truth, because a good tool in the Fediverse like Mastodon provides ample moderation capabilities. And in fact, when you look at the size of Facebook, I was looking at some numbers. It's probably bigger than this, but it was somewhere around 400 to 500 million posts a day hit the platform. 300 million pictures a day are uploaded. There isn't enough AI and there isn't enough moderators you could hire to properly be able to manage that amount of data. And of course, there are many things we could talk about Facebook like we have in the past about the privacy and security issues it represents, but just the moderation standpoint, nearly impossible. Not nearly impossible. It is right now with our current technology. When you look at a Fediverse, everything can still communicate with each other. So you still can have this mass community. You don't have to say, well, this Fediverse can't talk to this tool over here in this Fediverse. Everything can connect because we have these common protocols. But the cool thing is each individual community sets up its moderation standards. So everyone has, you now have a small community able to moderate and be involved in it versus trying to moderate all hundreds of millions of users out there on the Fediverse platforms. And to me, when I hear people say that the moderation and things don't exist in these platforms, to me, it's not only does it exist, but it's far superior way of moderation than what's out there.
It even allows for the user to have moderation on their own side. So you have the admin can do moderation on the server of their own instance. Sure. Then they have the ability to block other services that are known for having bad actors and stuff like that, and they can block that out and moderate those. But it also means that the user on those services can moderate their own access to things. So if they don't want to, if the instance they are on does not block a particular server, you can block it for your own purposes, so you don't have to deal with it, even if the server you're on doesn't care. So it gives you not only an option for moderating on the global scale of the Federation, it also allows you to do it on an individual level, which is just awesome.
Absolutely. Because there are things that people don't want to see. I may want to join an instance and I don't want to see politics. I don't want to see what other people are talking about in politics. I just want to know Linux stuff or football or sports. And I have that ability, I have that control within these services. We're going to discuss some of these services that you can use, but because of the moderation tools and the capabilities of connecting or deconnecting from a specific instance you want to hear from, I have the ability to own that. To me, it's the perfect balance between freedom of speech, right? And also making sure that you have control of what you see and what you engage with. It's the best answer that we have right now to those problems in my mind.
And actually, Ryan, I would take that one step further and say it is the only sustainable answer long-term. The reality is this: if two people want to engage in a dialogue, no matter how much, maybe nobody else on the entire planet Earth wants to engage in that particular dialogue, and they don't even want to see that dialogue occur. But if two people want to have that dialogue, those two people, should be able to do that because that's the internet, right? That's your freedom of choice to make that decision. That's why we believe so strongly in freedom of speech in most countries around the world. So two people should be able to do that. Moderation comes in, whereas the things that basically content filtering, what I don't want to see. And I think if we called it content filtering instead and put the onus on the end user to filter the content that comes to their machine, rather than constantly try and push it up to the server operator, constantly try and push it up towards the organization, constantly try to push it up to this idea that, hey, somebody should be in this room and make sure that these people can't say these things or have those conversations near me. Now, certainly in certain circumstances, like you said, you may get to a point where you say, hey, we are trying to set up a server and we're putting our costs and we're maintaining this. And there's a lot of effort that goes into that. I don't want to do that for any other reason than supporting technology, because that's why we're doing this. And that's perfectly valid as well. But I think, and we watched this conversation kind of unfold when the EU wanted to basically say, hey, you platforms basically have to be held accountable for the stuff they have. Matrix and others have come up and said, hey, that's really not an effective way to moderate a community. Filters are a much better way to moderate a community, but you have to be okay with saying this is what I want to expose myself to, and this is the kind of conversations and kind of collections and kind of groups and kind of content I want to be engaged in, and I'm fine with other people having that same choice.
And when we invest in products like this, it's so important that we understand the speech. When we talk about companies right now reacting to freedom of speech and things, and basically taking people off platforms based on what they said, a lot of that's mob mentality, right? So a company doesn't want to be associated with certain content. So the best option they can come up with is, well, we're just going to remove it entirely. Anybody that says anything related to XYZ, it gets it's gone. With the Fediverse, it fixes this mob mentality thing, because while I may, in my particular server, not want to hear that stuff and disconnect myself, somebody who does that, we're not taking away that person's ability to speak or those people's ability to have it. I may take away my ability because I don't want to hear it, but they still have a platform, whereas the mob mentality can control what happens with these big corporations, along with the privacy, along with the ads, along with all the other problems that come with these centralized tools that we're using. And that's why I think this is so important. But to break it down further, the Fediverse, Noah, you were really passionate about this. It's not just one Fediverse out there. What we're really talking about is protocols,
collection of servers, right?
Exactly.
And this is, I think, what's difficult for people to kind of grasp is this idea that you don't get to tell other people what to do on the internet, and they don't get to tell you what to do on the internet, and you can either engage with those people or you can choose not to. But that's what the end of where your choice begins and ends. And a lot of people are going to struggle with that. But the truth is that in a day and age of encryption, and a day and age of internet where I can send IP packets that are encrypted from any location to any other location, it's virtually impossible for you to stop two people from having a conversation or engaging with one another. And so what that eventually turns into is there's going to be collections of people that are going to say, hey, we want to share content with this select group of people, but no one else. And there's going to be other people that are going to say, hey, I want to interact with everybody. I don't really care who it is. And so I'm wide open. And so what you're going to have is little tiny collections of servers that speak the same protocol that are able to talk to each other, as well as very large infrastructures based on a shared technology resource. So for example, Matrix, if you don't specify who you're federating with, it's going to federate to everyone. Same thing with ActivityPub. If you don't specify which servers you want to limit that federation with, it's going to federate to everybody. And so you have to make those individual choices. But what that means is you may join a collection of servers and find out that isn't access to everything that's out there. It's only access to a subset. And that's okay. That's good. That allows individuals to kind of form the tribes that they want to form without hindrance.
I think the best example to explain how federated networks work is to compare it to email. Today, Noah signs up for a Proton Mail account, and he wants to send an email to me, but I'm not on Proton Mail. I'm on Tutanota. But he knows he could still send that email to me. I'm still going to receive his email. I'm still going to be able to read it, and I can send back an email to him, even though we're on two completely different services. And to me, that explains the Fediverse very well. As we created these common protocols, you have things like Matrix, O-Status, ActivityPub, Diaspora, that connects all of these services so that no matter which part I'm on, what server instance that I'm on, I still have the ability to communicate across, which is just, it's beautiful. Almost when you think about it.
Yeah, I think actually in a way that the connection between the different servers is really cool, but it's more than that, because the Fediverse, there's multiple Fediverses as we talked about, because the different protocols kind of separated in that sense, but there's also really cool things that the instances of the Fediverse can allow one instance to another instance, but it could also have one completely separate type of software to another type of software. So, for example, one of my favorite examples is so cool that you can respond to PeerTube videos as a comment on Mastodon. So you can respond to, like when you respond to a post from a Mastodon instance, it can be displayed as a regular comment on the PeerTube video. And that is a very cool thing. So it means you don't have to have an account on that PeerTube instance in order to comment on that video. And that is one of the most powerful things about the Fediverse concept is that it's not just server to server, it's type service to other type of service. All sorts of things can be interconnected.
So let's talk about some of these services so that people know what they can go out there and utilize. You have Mastodon. This would be the equivalent of like a Twitter to most people. They kind of compare it to that. You have PeerTube, which is a competitor to, say, I won't say competitor, but an alternative to, say, YouTube.
Right.
You have Diaspora, which is more like a Facebook. You have PixelFed, Write Freely, and Matrix and Element, which I know Noah doesn't know anything about Matrix or Element, but
Can you tell me more? I haven't heard of it.
Right.
something that Noah is extraordinarily passionate about, and rightfully so. Being in the Matrix Destination Linux crew recently has moved to our own instance internally, and utilizing it all this week. You can see why Noah is so passionate about it. Our ability to communicate with one another effectively through the show and everything we're doing across. And even bring Noah into that, even though he's in his own Fediverse, right? He can still contact us. He can still join our rooms. We can still hang out and chat. So no matter where everybody's we're connected.
Not to slide over that. We started with Linux Delta, the community instance. Anybody can sign up for an account at linuxdelta.com. And at the beginning of the year, after evaluating it for a few months, I went, there's no way that this isn't the tool that we use at Altispeed. So we contacted Element and said, hey, we want to purchase a paid subscription for Altispeed's technologies. And of course, that ended up being a third of the price of literally any other communication platform out there. So it was a great business decision, as well as I had the ability to continue to contact and use the same application and the same workflow and the same chat creation, DM, all the structures that we had on the community side, but in a smaller scale just for business. Then we'd been talking at Destination Linux. We went to the internal side, went to EMS, said, hey, we want to host this instance as well. When that happens, all of a sudden, I'm able to talk to, even from my Altispeed account, be able to talk to Ryan over at Destination Linux and Michael at Destination Linux. We're getting stuff set up and I'm able to participate in that discussion. I get home at night, I switch over to my personal account. I'm on my kernel Linux account. Again, I'm in the same chats. I'm participating in the same discussion. So it doesn't matter if I'm at work or if I'm at home, wherever it is, whatever the community is, I'm able to participate because all of those instances can talk together.
And how powerful this is for a business. So if you're a business, one of the things that constantly struggling with, in fact, in some of the companies I've worked for, they have 5 or 6 different communication applications you could choose from. You have no idea where you're going to get a meeting from, where you're going to get a chat from. You have to keep them all up. A lot of them use tons of resources like Slack and other things when they're up there. And there's no consistency because some people prefer to use this particular tool. Some people use this one. They buy a license for this. They buy a license for that. In your mind, Noah, you were trying to, I think, solve that for your company by saying, hey, this is the tool we're going to utilize. We're going to have one communication platform that not only can I use personally, but I can also use in the business as well and bounce back and forth. So I don't have 5 apps on my phone, depending on somebody wants to send me a Zoom link. They want to send me a chat and Telegram. They want to send me a chat signal. I'm just going to use Matrix.
A lot of businesses, I stood back for a second and just thought, as we onboard these businesses, what do? Well, we log into the admin portal in Teams or G Suite or whatever, and we create all the users and we set all their passwords, and then we print out documents that say, here's your username and your password, and you need to change it because we hand it out. And there's the whole thing. And I thought, let's see how that works with Element. And turns out that the onboarding process, if you treat EMS just like you treat Slack or Office 365 or G Suite, it functions exactly the same. There's one additional piece of information. That's the passphrase for the encryption. Other than that, works exactly the same as any other work communication tool. It just happens to be one, like you said, where with Slack, you get in there and you build the infrastructure and you build your company and you've been working in here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and you've got all the processes down. You just got the flow. And then all of a sudden, thousands of people want to join this room. But wait, shoot, now it doesn't scale. So you reach out to Slack and you're like, hey, we have all these thousands of people they want to join. They go, yeah, that's great. Here's a X amount of thousands of dollars that's going to cost. Oh no, now what? Now I can't do this. Well, now I'm fragmented. Now I have to have the community on this platform and work is over here. That's never going to happen to Altispeed. That's never going to happen to Destination Linux. That's never going to happen with Ask Noah because those tools, the thing that we pay for, they don't stop us. EMS doesn't stop you from spinning up a community instance and then talking to those places. So it's infinitely expandable. And when other businesses spin up and they start running, then we can talk to them too. So it's just the bigger the system goes, the more stable, the more reliable, the better it gets.
So when we talk about advantages here, let's go through some. Users are in control of moderation and rules. You get to be an adult again, right? You decide what you see, what you don't. Just like when you're flipping through your television, you get to decide what you want to watch, what you don't. the news channels you want to watch, the ones you don't, shared open protocols to use across a variety of different services. So we've talked about social media services. We've talked about video and chat services. We've talked about just having, the chat services and things in there. For instance, Matrix has Rocket Chat enablement and things. So you have multiple services that can be covered within these instances. Communities are smaller, be more moderated. Jill, what are some things that you think are advantages for these type of tools?
Oh boy. So, just owning your own internal communications, right there.
That's powerful.
That is so powerful, and your freedom of speech for
Right.
another. There's so many advantages that it was hard for us to come up with disadvantages, but there are a few.
What are some of those disadvantages in your mind? Like what are some that it needs to work on? Because every tool has disadvantages, right?
To me, one of the biggest ones is the learning curve for setup and use of the Fediverse. It's hard for new users to learn how to do this, install the software and validate it with other machines. That can be kind of tricky, but I think they're going to get better and better at making that a much easier process, especially since there's going to be it's going to be adopted more on the internet, which is really nice.
Yeah, the barrier to entry is probably the biggest issue, the biggest disadvantage, but it's also getting easier and easier as it goes. I think another disadvantage would probably be like the not having your personalized data stolen from ads. I mean, that's just who doesn't want our ads? I know we want to give that data to everybody. Come on, let's bring those ads into the Fediverse. I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's.
Don't do that.
I don't want to skim past the onboarding here, because this is something I put a lot of thought into. And if I sat down with the average business owner and signed them up for Office 365 or signed them up for G Suite, most of them have no clue what to do. They might be able to go and create the users. They probably figure that part out. But actually, like setting up the passwords and configuring IMAP and getting everything synced and Azure synced for me, none of that they're going to be able to figure out, right? So they hire an IT company, or they have an internal IT person say, hey, we need you to onboard these accounts, right? If I take that process and apply it towards the Fediverse, it's no more difficult. It's the exact same thing. Signing up for something like EMS, and I use EMS because it's the only example that I'm aware of where you have a open source product that has federation, and so you can choose to self-host it, or you just go to their site and click up sign up for a plan like you would with Office 365 or G Suite. So you can start from that model. And if you compare EMS's service with what you have available to you with Office 365 or G Suite or any of the other ones, Proton Mail, all of them are basically the same. It's going to require somebody with some technical know-how to set up. Now, certainly when you start getting into hosting your own servers and setting up your own Fediverse and moderation and what servers are going to talk to and not, of course it's going to take more technical insight. But remember, we need to compare those people with the people that are working for Microsoft Teams at Microsoft doing their server administration and the development, because that's the task. You're no longer talking about signing up for a service. You're no longer talking about an end user. Now you're talking about being part of the platform's infrastructure.
Right.
That's a server administration task.
I think you're right about the concept of the business perspective, and I agree completely in terms of like comparing.
It applies to individuals.
It's still different, because with an individual, you don't really have that option to get signing up with a IT team, a company to teach you how to do these things.
But I'm saying you, as an individual, you can go over to element.im and click on sign up, right?
Well, I mean, Element.io. But anyway, the point is that it's still not simple. That's why tutorials exist, to explain how to do them. And
I respectfully disagree. How is it not simple? You click on
to
plan,
you, it's not simple, but I agree. When you compare it to something like a Telegram or Signal, where you put your phone number in, you choose your username, and you're done. Right. It's very different than your average users do not understand. What am I joining? What service am I joining? What Fediverse am I joining? What's this encryption thing? What are these options? Why do I have two places to search?
Why did these emojis pop up for no reason?
The QR code.
So one at a time. So I went to element.linuxdelta.com. I have two options: sign in or create account. If I click on create account, I have to supply three things: a username, a password, and the email is even optional. So really, I just have to pick a username, pick a password, and click register. That is no more difficult of a sign-up process than any other service on the internet. In fact,
except for the fact that they also have to know that that
instance
instance exists, and they have to know how to get to that instance stuff.
But that would be that. But again, you at that point, you're now talking about branding and promotion. So now we're talking about my ability to promote element.linuxdelta.com the way that Discord promotes theirs. But again,
okay, I think we're going off into the weeds.
We're not. We're not. And here's why. We have to be able to just because Federation and open source allows one tool to accomplish the same thing that took 7 other proprietary tools to do does not mean that that one tool should be compared to any one aspect of the proprietary tools. So in other words, we can't say because you have the ability to host a number of different element instances that it's unclear which one a user should go to sign up. That would be like saying, well, if Discord had open source and people could host multiple Discords instead of real multiple Discords, not just create multiple little instances within discord.com. People could actually do that. They would have the exact same problem. But because Discord doesn't support that feature, because it's all under one site, that issue doesn't exist. So if you want to compare apples to apples, then you have to take something like matrix.org and say, okay, is it any harder to sign up on matrix.org for an Element account than it is to sign up on Discord? And of course, the answer to that is no.
You don't have to do apples to apples because it's not the same. Like you do, they are different things, and it is a disadvantage to have the onboarding structure that it is. And
I disagree, but okay.
It's easier to get an account on name anything else. And this is not against Matrix. This is against most of the Fediverse has this disadvantage, but that's also part of its advantage and value of having this interconnection.
Could you explain to me where my misunderstanding of could you explain to me where my analogy is wrong? If I take, let's say matrix.org, because that is the public facing instance of Element, right? If you compare that to, let's say, Discord, can you explain to me how, if we ignore all of the other instances that are out there for a moment, and we're just comparing matrix.org to Discord, how is it any harder to click on try now and sign up for an account with just your username?
Because again, you're trying to say apples to apples, and they're different things because of the different instance structure. With Discord, you have an account. It doesn't
have to be, though. Like we could ignore all of the other instances, and all we could focus on or talk about is matrix.org, and it would function the same. You would have all of the same benefits of Federation, but you wouldn't have to worry about any of those other instances. It would still work.
The difference,
but you'd have one place to sign up.
There's multiple differences of like, okay, one, if you want to do encryption, one of the main things about Matrix is the encryption. Discord doesn't have encryption, so you can just guarantee that's not there. But with Matrix, it's difficult to set up encryption if you don't know how to do it in the first place. That's one example.
That's true, but it's no more difficult. Hold on, it's no more difficult to set up than Signal or any other encrypted app.
Well, at Signal, you just put your phone number in and you're done. So that's
not true at all. That's not true at all. So Signal syncs up those keys to a master key file, and then that gets redistributed. That's what the QR code scanning thing does when you go from one client to the next, which Matrix implements.
But if someone is on Signal, is also in your contact account, they are automatically connected to you on Signal, so they can just connect to you at any point.
How about we don't go down this chain too much, because I don't think it's particularly interesting to people, and also I think that it's a agree to disagree. I think certain parts are going to be slightly more difficult, or we can even say just different than what you may expect from a different service. But at the end of the day, I think we're all arguing the same thing, which is that these tools are definitely useful. I think they're definitely the future. They provide more protection, more moderation, more capabilities than the alternatives to them. And that's really what we should be talking about. And I think that while interfaces and the different tools and things that we use to access them, there's always going to be improvements. I'd say that about any application, Signal, Discord, any of them out there, where I wish it had this, I wish it had that, and they don't. But I think you're more likely to get it in services like this because, for instance, I know that Noah had certain things that he wanted as a company. If we get other companies into the federated services, guess what they're going to do? Companies have money and they need this fixed because it makes the money to fix it. So they're going to fund these projects. They're going to get in there. And then we as the users get the benefit as well from the features that they pull in, which is what makes the Fediverse such an awesome, Fediverses, I should say, such an awesome concept. There are other decentralized tools out there, such as Library and DTube, that use things like the blockchain and, of course, BitTorrent and things out there. So there are other options for decentralization. I just think Fediverse is probably my favorite right now.
I like the Fediverse concept. Just like the decentralized thing is awesome, but there's kind of sometimes the blockchain style of the decentralization still has a little bit of a centralization. So it's like it's decentralized in itself, but the Fediverse is decentralized completely, so it doesn't matter what service it is, what server it is. You can connect everything, like the Write Freely app, which is kind of like a blogging system that you can make comments on, or you can, like, I don't even think they have a registration thing. You use another account to write on it, and that is just a really cool thing. And you also have like Pixel Fed, which is like an Instagram style of Fediverse stuff. So all of these different things can interconnect with each other, provided that they're using something like ActivityPub or another protocol that is similar. And I think that is the best point that you're saying, is that the Fediverse as a structure, or the Fediverses as a concept, is the powerful aspect of it is this interconnection stuff, but also at the same time, the control that the user has for what they see, what they use on the Fediverse. And I think that having the moderation available is, people, when they say there's no moderation, there's more so than you can possibly need, and that is what makes the Fediverse fantastic. Having the
Fediverse,
control,
become an adult again.
yes, that's the new slogan. Yep, we've coined it. That is the new slogan.
Yes, here at Destination Linux, we are on the Fediverse Snowpiercer train.
There you go. Way to bring it back, Jill.
So are we done with the topic?
Yeah. Unless you
just
have something else to.
You have something else?
No. I just want to finish the conversation. Then if you want to include it, you can. If you don't, that's fine. But anyway, am I missing something, Michael, or do we just disagree?
Hey everyone, sorry for cutting this section short, but there was just so much content this week that we didn't have room for all of it. So unfortunately, I had to cut this out. So if you'd like to find out what I said in response to Noah, as well as the rest of the conversation we had in the Patron Post Show. In fact, in the Patron Post Show, we sort of had a battle of Noah versus Michael, and the announcer for it was Ryan, and there was referees and all sorts of stuff. It was an interesting conversation. It wasn't actually a battle, but it was kind of presented in that way, I guess. If you want to check it out, there's a lot of great content on the unedited version, and just become a patron of the Destination Linux podcast to check out the unedited version. I'll have a link in the show notes. You can go on Patreon or sponsors, and I'll have links for both of the episodes already available for those who want to watch the unedited version. So be sure to check that out. And again, sorry for cutting it short, but back to the rest of the show. This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the password manager that we use and trust. Bitwarden lets you set up things like a PIN to easily access your password manager, as well as additional authentication such as master passwords and adding phrases to even fingerprint security. You can do all this to keep your passwords safe. Bitwarden is the easiest and safest way for individuals, teams, and businesses to store, share, and sync sensitive data. And you can go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. And Bitwarden is the password manager that I use and trust because Bitwarden is 100% open source. You can self-host it if you want to, and also in addition to the 100% open source, they do security audits. So yeah, the community can go and check through the code and see if it's great, but they don't stop there. They go and send it to third-party companies and have them scan through it to make sure it is as safe as possible. So make the smart move like many from the community have and go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. But there's actually a premium account that is less than $1 per month. That's right, less than $1 per month will give you access to your premium account, going to bitwarden.com/DLN and signing up for that account. And you get stuff like 1 gigabyte of encrypted file storage, a 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F, Duo, and many other services, including priority customer service and so much more. So if you're like me, you want to show your appreciation to the company of Bitwarden to get that premium account, because it shows appreciation for them supporting open source, and it shows the appreciation for them supporting the Destination Linux podcast. So check that out at bitwarden.com/DLN. And thanks again to Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
In the news this week, RHEL has expanded their free offering. So as you may remember, a few weeks ago, Red Hat announced that they were making some major changes to CentOS Linux. And essentially what they were doing was CentOS is going to ride 1-point release ahead of where RHEL proper rides. And the idea behind that is that changes coming down the pipe can be tested in RHEL, and all the server administrators can go, yep, that's good. And then it pushes to Red Hat, and then it's fine. Now, a lot of people in the community were very upset with this because there was a certain amount of mom took away the free cookie jar. And those people, I don't have time. But there was a legitimate portion of the community that said,
I like cookies.
Hey, Red Hat, Canonical has the most deployment in the cloud with Ubuntu, and CentOS was finally starting to kind of climb the ladder because people were excited that you could go from CentOS to Red Hat, and you kind of killed the golden goose there. So people were a little upset. And what happened was within 1 week, Rocky Linux came up and said, "Hey, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have another rebrand of Red Hat." And Cloud Linux did the same thing. There's a couple other ones. A lot of people have come back and said, "Hey, we will just recreate CentOS." Well, after listening to the community feedback, Red Hat came back and said, "We're going to change things up a little bit." And so the team is expanding what they are offering. So previously, you used to have a Red Hat developer license and be part of the Red Hat developer program. And that allowed you to test a Red Hat installation to see how things worked. Of course, if you wanted to move it into production, then you needed to purchase an actual license. Well, Red Hat now is expanding that program. Actually, the details of which I should mention are we had Brian Exelbrand came on to came on to Ask Noah this week to actually break the news for us and say, "Hey, this is what's happening at Red Hat." And so I invite you to go check out that episode at podcast.asknoahshow.com. But what the synopsis of what he explains is they're going to allow individuals to sign up for an account that will allow you to use up to 16 servers with a RHEL proper subscription in production. So that means that you as an individual can spin up to 16 servers, run it in your business, run it in your home, let your kids run it for a friend or a family member, whatever you want. And
okay, fine, Noah. But what's really going to happen is they're going to harass me and try to upsell me and all this other stuff as soon as I sign up, right?
So if you want to upgrade to a supported RHEL subscription, it will be an easy process to do that. But no, they want individuals to play and test. So no, you're not going to be contacted. You're not going to be harassed.
Nice lead in there, right?
Really what they're looking for, what they're trying to do here is offer people access to the same code base that you have on RHEL with the same updates that you had on RHEL. Because remember, on CentOS, you did not get security updates at the same speed that Red Hat got them. Red Hat paid subscriptions got them sooner. Now, this isn't a perfect answer for two reasons. One is you're still beholden to Red Hat, the company, and is a legal agreement with Red Hat, the company that can change at any time. And so that's not ideal because it's not a community-controlled operating system anymore. It is directly controlled from Red Hat. Additionally, because it is a 16 machine limit, and that licenses follows the individual, it's going to make it almost not really impossible, but very difficult to use that in any sort of business center, which, to be fair, is kind of their goal. Because if the person whose name is on the Red Hat license walks out the door, that license walks with them. And so that's going to be a little difficult. And then the other thing is, of course, it's all self-supported. So if you want to call for support, you're going to have to purchase a regular Red Hat subscription at a whopping cost of $379. I mean, it's not like it's a lot, but yeah, they're expanding this program. And I think really what Red Hat is focusing on here is they're trying to reduce the amount of friction it takes to get people on Red Hat. And so this is going to allow all sorts of things. It's going to allow VPS providers to allow you to spin up Red Hat proper right on like DigitalOcean and Vultr and all those places, assuming they're willing to navigate this license thing that Red Hat is setting up. But because you're an individual, you'll be able to assign your own license and get updates.
Let me ask you this, Noah. Had they launched this along with the announcement changes in CentOS, would the pushback been as fierce? Obviously, it still doesn't fit every user case, but do you think it would have been as ugly?
No, because they would have had a solution as to how an individual could access the same code base that they did before, and so nothing really practically would have changed for a lot of people. So yeah, I think it would have been slightly better. But I really believe that what Red Hat should be continue to focus on, I think this is a great start, but what they should continue to focus on is worrying about the lowest friction possible to getting people onto the platform. And I really wouldn't focus so much on limiting how many machines or tying it to individuals or any of those things, because the reality is, first of all, any motivated individual is just going to say, okay, well, John is over at that business. That's what we're going to throw the license under, and Frank's over at this one. There's ways to work your way around that, right? People are going to do that anyway. And so the question is, wouldn't it just be better to control or not necessarily control, but at least have influence over that community, the community spin of that, and just say, hey, here is XYZ product, and it's a RHEL copy, and you get updates a little bit later, but we're going to continue to develop, and we're going to continue to maintain it, and you can put it on as many machines as you want. It's a much more approachable, I would think, license schemes to VPS providers and universities and wherever else, where they're not having to keep track of whose name's on that license and what happens if they.
Right.
It seems like unnecessary friction. The kind of people that are going to sign up for this program and run and deal with the hassle of signing into a specific account for every 16 machines. those are not the people that are calling Red Hat a few weeks later and saying, hey, you know what we need? 500,000 copies of Red Hat, baby. Let's sign me up and I'll write you a check. That's not that guy, right? That's the guy that's at his house being like, I ain't got to do it. You can get a Minecraft server set up. That's who you're targeting.
Yeah.
Towards.
I love. I love the ability that I can
too.
now do a single sign in into Red Hat, and I can take my home servers and play around with RHEL. I think this is so cool, up to 16 of my servers, and move them up to RHEL. So to your point, it may not answer everybody's.
Then your wife gets 16.
Yeah, exactly.
When your kids turn 18,
she can get 16. Yeah, you're right. The bigger your family, the more licenses you get. Also, starting around February 1st, you can use the expanded Red Hat developer program to run RHEL on major public clouds, including AWS, Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure. So you only pay the usual hosting fees there, but your RHEL copy, you don't have to have that license there either, which I thought was pretty cool. Look, you know what struck me the most out of this article when I read it? That Red Hat listened to its community, right? It's all the people. It's all the people. It didn't say, you know what? So what? Deal with it. We're a big corporation, makes billions of dollars. We don't need you anyways. They're like, all right, let's figure out something to try to make it close to right. And that's what I see from a company. And that makes me very happy, because you generally don't see that in big companies like that very often anymore.
Yeah. Remember, it happened with Ubuntu with 32-bit when they were going to completely take that away, and they took some of it away, but not all of it. We can.
They took
still
the right
play
amount
games.
away. Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of like the Red Hat thing, I think that it's fair to say that if they had done this when they announced it, it would have been better for them. But I also think that I think that they did listen, and they absolutely listened to the community, because they did a survey to find out how many people what they used CentOS for and RHEL for. So they actually have been in doing the details with the community engagement and stuff. So they have been listening to the community in that sense. But they did already plan to release RHEL out to people in a much broader sense with this free stuff, because they talked about it on Destination Linux previous episode when we had Mike McGrath as for an interview from Red Hat about this topic, and he did mention that they were going to be doing stuff like this. So they were planning to do it. I think the biggest issue that they had really was that they didn't time it all together, because that's really where that backlash came from.
Brian touched on that a little bit. This was part of the plan long before IBM. They had been working on this for a long time, and essentially what he said was, it's very difficult to announce what we're going to offer as a replacement for a thing before we discontinue the thing and say, like, this is no longer going to be. Here's what is going to be going forward. And so they the way that he made it sound was that
that is true. I agree, that is true. But at the same time, here's a suggestion: you make a blog post. Paragraph says you're going to get rid of it. Paragraph says what you're replacing with, and then that's right after, and therefore you're done.
So a 2-paragraph system, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 2-paragraph system. Yeah.
Wow.
That's my idea.
In all seriousness, though, I mean, I think it's important for us to remember, right? I doubt it's that simple. I think if it was simple,
it's
just
definitely not that simple. I get that for
$34
sure.
billion company. I'm sure if us 4 Yahoos can figure it out, I'm sure there's somebody at Red Hat that said, hey, you know what? Maybe we should just announce all this stuff right at once. And I'm sure they had a reason for saying no.
Right. I'm just making a joke about it. It's definitely an issue that there's definitely going to be some legal stuff they have to cross the I's and dot the T's, of course. So like getting all that stuff out there, I get that. But it was just more of like the sense of if they would have done this, it would have been more beneficial for them. They wouldn't have as much backlash. They still would get backlash anyway, because making a change,
anytime you change,
everybody hates change, right? So not everybody, but
everybody hates change.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Everybody.
Sure. Depending on the scenario, I would also have to agree that I do hate change. But okay, fair enough. But I think that it would be easier for those changes to be accepted with those things were already there. But for me personally, I think that this is fantastic. I've always wanted to use RHEL, but I've always been super cheap. So I typically used CentOS. And now having the option to use genuine RHEL, and what's even more cool is thanks to Neil in the patron chat, he's told us that there's other services that you get with this subscription. It's not just you get to use RHEL, you get to use the live kernel patching.
Kernel patching, that's cool.
You also get the Red Hat Insight system, which is why did you have this licensing account, so that when you can go into the Insight system, it'll tell you if there's any issue with your system, you can quickly address it from this Insights portal, and just quickly is like, okay, make this change, and then boom, it's done. That's awesome. And I didn't know it existed because I never had the chance to run RHEL. And now that I can, I am super excited. I don't know if I need 16 even, but I'll come up with something.
You do need 16. It's
Probably.
like anything else. Once you get one server, you need 16.
Probably.
Then 32, then 45.
Yep.
Yes.
Then 128, then 256, and 512.
Exactly.
And
That has to be
512.
divisible by,
Sure. Sure. So let's move on to something else that's happening related to distros, but this one is a kind of a negative topic, and that is that there are some distributions that are considering removing Chromium, or at least removing certain features of Chromium inside of their repos, because a Google dev has caused quite a stir within the Linux community when they mentioned that the APIs that allows Google Sync will no longer be supported outside of Google Chrome, which means Chromium, Chromium OS, or anything based on either of those. Kind of an
We
issue.
told you.
So-
We told you this was going to happen. For all the years we've been doing this podcast, what have we been saying? You give control to one single engine, they're going to get everybody on board, then they're
Pretty
going to
much.
start stripping away features. We told you, if you've been listening, you knew this was coming. And this is just the beginning. I promise you, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
They're testing the waters here.
I mean, you make a good point. I agree. That's we have said that before, and this is probably just the beginning because Google has done weird stuff related to Chromium on multiple occasions. They even tried to put binary blobs in there, violating their own license completely. So who knows what they'll try to do. But they're removing features is not uncommon for Google. So it makes sense that this is only the first stage of that process. But this is something that is happening that the community of open source packages and maintainers have all expressed their frustration with this move. But according to the post, the reason wasn't cost or of infrastructure or even a security thing. In the beginning, they kind of implied it was sort of a security thing because the way it was worded in the removal. But really, they came back and said, it's not. And they said that they just want to secure their APIs, essentially. And by that, they mean they just want Google Chrome to have control of the APIs. And what's weird about it is that multiple distributions have talked about the fact that they were given permission to use these APIs. It's not like they were, these APIs were they were taken and they didn't have permission because they were talking about security originally. But it also meant that they talked about the Google Chrome APIs are also public. So it is technically possible to take the Google Chrome APIs and put it into Chromium, but that will violate the terms of service, and therefore the distros won't do that because that is, that will open them up to
Proprietary
legal
software is
issues.
so much less complex, isn't it?
Wait,
Jeez,
okay,
give me a
we're not.
break.
I never said
I'm sorry,
that.
I was going down that road. No, you didn't. But it's amazing to me the complexity of this nonsense we have to deal with because of these licenses and things.
Because
that
open
they
source
throw
is
in
so
here.
complicated for sure. Yeah. But this is interesting because we have responses from Arch, Fedora, Debian, Slackware, OpenSUSE, and all sorts of stuff has stated that they will remove the Chromium browsers or in some way or change it if necessary. So some of them are actually saying that they're just going to leave it as is, and if it breaks, it breaks. And the other ones are saying that they're just going to, like Fedora, for example, has already removed the API functionality. So the next update will just disable this weird broken thing that Google's doing anyway.
So you can't sync your bookmarks. You can't sync the passwords.
Right.
You can't sync anything thanks to Google's change here that has no real reasoning behind it at all, other than now we have control of the entire browser market and the engine. And so, we win by.
Right. And
quote a very wise man who just 5 minutes ago said, "We told you this was coming." Like, what? Why else? Let me ask you something. Is Microsoft having problems getting access to that Google API in their Edge browser?
I don't know. They probably
not. They probably wrote their own.
Oh yeah,
They probably
You
have
think
their
that
own
They were
thing.
able to work something out. Gee, that's funny. Microsoft, because they have billions of dollars and have something to offer to Google in return, they get access to it. But when you're the free thing that wants to value privacy and the users that use the browser, that's the thing that gets.
Well, I mean, to give a little bit of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not defending
Yeah,
Microsoft.
give me the other
but
side. What
I'm
was
not,
Google
I'm
doing?
not
Oh my gosh.
defending. I'm not.
There he
defending,
goes on the other bridge.
Shh, I'm not.
That's okay, I
I'm
wanna
not
hear
doing
it.
that. Shush.
And
What
the
I'm
train
saying
is going over the bridge.
is that some of these browsers, I think Edge including, have their own sync service. And like Vivaldi and Brave also, I think, have their own sync service, so they're not really affected by this. However, it's more of the sense of like Google is just not allowing anyone to do it. So it's kind of worse because they're just locking it down to their own control, their own proprietary browser and stuff like that. So that part is annoying. So Ryan said something that was really interesting that I wanted to cover. It's about the bookmarks and the password sync. Most importantly, the password sync. If you have Chromium and you're using the Google accounts because some people's work or schools require them to do so, then you have your stuff stored in this thing. And maybe you don't want to use Google Chrome because you don't want to use a proprietary browser. But if you don't get your stuff out of that service before it cancels it, you will lose access to your passwords and to your bookmarks and stuff like that. So you will have to use Google Chrome. Now, you won't like lose access completely because you'll still have the Chrome option, technically speaking. But if you don't want to use a proprietary browser, then you need to do it very quickly. And since we're talking about making sure your passwords are secure and safe, have you heard of Bitwarden? Just a thought.
Hey, let me ask you something.
Yes.
Does Bitwarden work on Chrome?
Yeah, it does. It does seem to do that. Yes.
Does it work on Firefox?
It does. Yes, it does.
So if one was on Chrome and had all their thousands of passwords that they'd entered using the promo code that we've given them and used Bitwarden for free and had all their passwords synced and secured, would that person be able to just switch to Firefox
they
and
could
get all
just
access
use
to their
whatever
password just by signing
browser,
in?
whatever browser they want to. Even the command line, you could do whatever you want. Yep.
Oh, I could use links to browse the web.
I have no
Ouch.
idea.
The terminal?
I don't know. I'm not making that claim, but you can use the terminal. So,
So I think that to wrap this up, this is just the beginning. This is what we've been saying was going to happen. They're going to start stripping more and more features. And as Noah said perfectly, a corporation can recover from this very easily. A big company like Microsoft, even if they don't have some secret deal behind the scenes, which I would be shocked if they didn't, they could write their own. It's no big deal. What it impacts is the open source devs, the people who've packaged this for Google for years on these open source projects, have supported it, have helped put bug reports in there, have helped fix security issues, all the work that they've done. Basically, this is Google giving them we don't care, so what, bye.
yep.
That's all it is.
Pretty much. And if you don't want a browser that will take away your features just randomly because they feel like it, check out Firefox. It's a interesting. If you've never heard of it, there's a really interesting video on my channel about the 7 reasons why Firefox is my favorite browser. You can check that out. Link in the show notes. Yeah.
Now for some happy news, we're going to get into gaming.
Yay!
So
Always love this part.
Yes, this is always a happy thing. MMORPGs, massively multiplayer online RPGs, are the games that ruined gaming for me for more than a decade. They ruined it because I couldn't play any other game and get joy out of it once I was addicted to EverQuest, Dark Age of Camelot, and Ultima
You're saying
Online.
it's too good, but it's too good. So
They
it
were
ruined
so
game.
good. Like there was no other type of game where you had the community and the friendships and the, just the feeling that you are this character that you're playing for the time that you were in the games. And that's why MMOs kind of took over the world for a little while. It's not the same anymore, but I still look for that nostalgia factor every once in a while to go in and play a good MMO, interact with some people in the community, go do a good dungeon raid, take down a big dragon named Michael. I don't know if they have that in this, but the game I'm talking about here is Project Gorgon. So this is an MMO.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's early access game. It has native Linux support. So that's one of the issues with a lot of these MMOs like World of Warcraft and things. You can get them to run on Linux, but generally you got to do it through, Proton or something else to try to get the clients to work. This is native. The graphics are EverQuest-like, but that's not a bad thing in my mind because it kind of feels like that nostalgia thing. For me, anyways, you can play a free demo of the game, which is my favorite part. So you can go download it. You don't have to pay a penny if you don't want to, and start playing and see if it's something you like. But kill monsters, lots of them, in order to keep the experience fun and interesting. They develop unique combat experiences. Fighting feels fresh. Dungeon puzzles, traps, terrifying bosses like Michael. And the combat skills are entirely freeform.
I'm a dragon. Now I'm a terrible boss. All right.
I'm hoping that they're listening so that they'll implement you as a boss. Because how awesome would it be to fight a Michael?
That'd be
Michael
awesome.
can transform himself into a pig and Ryan a cow and Noah a spider.
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
game.
They could pay homage to us, and then we help promote their game. But the thing about
Why do I get a pig and Noah gets a spider? I want a cool thing.
I don't know. It's just random.
That's fair. They do show you can do like its transformed thing in the game, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm not much of an RPG gamer or MMO otherwise or anything, but I checked out the demo of the video for this game, and I will say it seems pretty interesting. This no class system they have, and you can build any skill you want in any type of like category you want to in order to make your own completely custom class. That is kind of cool. But I do want to point out one thing that I noticed that was kind of amusing to me is that one of the skills that you can build of is kind of weird. It has how can dying be a skill?
I love that they did this.
Yes,
Like
that
I
was
leveled up
great.
in dying because I'm not good at gaming. So, I died a couple times and it's like, you're
This
level
actually
2 and
has my
dying.
interest for this might be the first game in Destination Linux history that I'm
Hey,
like,
they took
I can die. That happens all the time. When I
It's like, I can build my skill everywhere.
I'm level 100 at death.
They took some clues from Dungeons and Dragons.
There you go.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Jill, have you played this game yet?
No, I haven't. I've been wanting to.
Okay.
and,
Well, when you
it looks
join,
like
we're
a
going
lot
to
of
build a
fun.
guild.
That
and
would
then-
be cool.
Yeah. And then we're going to talk to the developers and get a Michael Monster in there. It will be late all the time.
I love it.
It will be hard to.
Yeah, the
Michael's a
boss
pig.
fight
He
starts,
can't be a
and then it
monster.
doesn't show up for 5 minutes.
And it throws stools at you. You have to dodge the stool.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
I love it. So go check out Project Gorgon. It's out
Looks
there on
so much
Steam right
fun.
now. Free demo.
And also something else you should check out is the software spotlight for this week. We got some download managers we wanted to talk about. And if you've never heard of a download manager, this is going to be a treat for you because this will make it a lot easier to do a lot of different stuff. So we're going to talk about two different download managers, uGet and XDM, which means Extreme Download Manager. And these are powerful tools that increase download speed. And the way they do this is in a variety of methods. So they have multiple connections that allow you to download from different servers. So you can have multiple servers and multiple connections from the same servers and combine those streams of data into one single file when it's complete. So that makes it faster. So instead of having to download one stream at a time or one connection at a time, you can actually have multiples in case the server limits you in some ways, or you have multiple servers, making it easier for those servers to. It's kind of like sort of a federated download in a way. Not exactly, but Anyway, it also allows you to place these downloads into a queue to download as many as possible. So this means you can add a bunch of things to download and not worry about your internet being saturated because it won't start downloading everything all at once like a browser would do. This way, it would space it out so in case you need to preserve your connection speed for other things and that sort of stuff. And it also has ability to like pause and resume downloads and schedule
That's
downloads
huge.
and that sort of stuff. Yeah, and you can integrate it into different browsers like Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera, Vivaldi, etc. Both of these applications have multiple browser support. And then there's also stuff that's specific to these individual applications that I want to talk about. One, uGet has an integration plugin with a project called Area 2, which is a really cool, powerful command line tool that you can integrate into. It's really interesting. And also XDM has a built-in video converter, which lets you convert your download videos to different formats so that you can put them on your phone and that sort of stuff. Very, very cool. We'll have links to both of those in the show notes, so check those out.
This week, we're continuing our coverage of Git. Now, if you've been following along, at this point, you can initiate a repository, clone a repository, add and sign files, make a commit, connect to a remote repository, push to the remote, and even create and switch branches. Now we're going to talk about what you do if you make a mistake. This is where revert comes in. And if I'm honest with you, this is really where Git starts to show its power. So your first step is to make sure to get the history so you know which commit to revert for. You do this by using git space log tac online. Then you can type git space revert and add the number corresponding to the commit. Now, if you don't really, this might be a little hard to visualize in your head, but I'll tell you how we've used this functionality at Ultispeed. It might bring it home a little bit. So our GitLab account is tied to our Matrix instance. And so there is a dev channel, and anytime anything is changed in any of our repositories, it posts a message into that room. And so if you're just sitting on, you get a notification, hey, this thing changed. And of course, it has that number of the commit. So when we have an issue with something, we say, hey, software broke, our developers will say, this is the commit number that broke this, or this is the commit we'd have have to undo to fix that, or this is the commit we used to fix this problem. And so if there's an issue with that commit, that's how we reference that change to the code.
Nice.
And that change is unique to that specific repository and that specific software change and that specific collection of code. And so we can undo parts of code while leaving everything that happened before, since, or after intact. Very, very useful tool. Now, if this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, you say, what is Git? How do I get started? Well, we've covered all of this. Go back and watch the backlog of Destination Linux. Each week we cover it, and come back next week for the continuation of our exploration with Git.
All right. So a big thank you to each and every one of you by supporting us, by watching or listening to Destination Linux. Thank you to all these beautiful people across all of these various platforms that have joined us here live today on Sunday. If you want more DL, become a patron. Like the people sitting in here, the super secret room behind the scenes with us right
studio.
now that you can't see. Yeah, in our recording stadium.
Oh,
even.
Stadium. I love it. Yes.
There we go.
Recording stadium.
You get a bunch of perks like unedited versions of the show, VIP access to events and live recordings of Destination Linux every single Sunday. But you also get to hang out for the patron only after chat, which is not live. And they get to ask all kinds of questions like, Michael, why did you buy a stool?
It's just not streamed, right?
Yeah, it's not streamed.
Well, yeah, it's live, but
live.
not streamed. And
We're
also,
out
this
here.
because the stool is super inexpensive and therefore a good deal.
Don't answer the question. It's for patrons only to know.
Oh, my
So
bad.
come
My bad.
come on and hang out with the crew.
Muted now.
Oh,
You're muted, Noah.
No, we can't hear you.
no, I broke the
broke
internet.
it.
No, it's still
Can't hear
broken.
Oh, I'll do Noah's part as Noah. In addition, guys, every Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern. live.com.
Oh my god.
You didn't have enough Red Bull. Work on it.
Dang it.
Or
Give a little more
McDonald's
Red Bull.
before.
Am I?
Yep,
am I
you're back.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Oh, I'm back. Oh,
can
good.
hear you
good.
now.
Okay, I can do my part now.
Go ahead.
In addition, every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll be live at dlnlive.com. The best part, everyone is welcome. Every single Linux-loving human being on Earth is invited to watch the recording of Destination Linux Live each and every week. We can't wait to see you there in the chat.
Love that man's fire.
Right? And you can go right now to dlnstore.com to pick up some swag, and you can have t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers. We actually got a bunch of other stuff coming too. So check it out. Go to dlnstore.com to get your own DLN swag, and all sorts of great stuff is there. And to get stuff like the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt, it's a shirt we designed to show that whether or not you know that Linux is there, it probably is. So go to dlnstore.com to check it out.
And we have so many amazing shows on the Destination Linux network. So make sure to watch the Pseudo Show, the Ask Noah Show with our very own Noah Chalaya, and This Week in Linux with Michael Tennell, the DOS Geek Channel with Ryan, yay, DLN Extend, Hardware Addicts, and get your game on with our latest show, GameSphere, with Chris Ware. So go to destinationlinux.network and subscribe to all these shows to keep those penguins marching and the full Monty of Linux and open source awesome sauce on the 10-mile Snowpiercer train.
Love it.
Nice.
And everybody have a great week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Oh boy.
See
I
you
did it
next
for
week.
Noah.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
All right, patrons, you can turn on your cameras, turn on
I
your mics.
can't nail the yeah, and you can't nail the.
I can't. I couldn't. You're right. You're right.